So this is title of this meeting is Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness. So we want to start by getting clear on, what is why are we here? So the title is a pretty good indicator. So we're here because we perceive in some way that there is a relative lack of health, wealth, or happiness, maybe all of the above. And if those words are not the best fit for you, then you can substitute other words. Joy, peace, contentment, freedom, actualization, realization, truth. Fill in the blank with what works for you, but you notice that they're all pointing to the same essential desire. So we have a desire, which is I want this one thing more than anything else. And we don't know what the right word is, or maybe you do think you have the right word, and that can be its own trap. So either way, don't, if you think you have the right word, if you think you know what the right, if you think, oh, I know what it is that I really want. I want enlightenment, or I know what I really want. I want perfect physical healing, or I know what I really want. I want infinite wealth, or whatever you think. Be willing to let go of that, or just to hold it lightly. On the other hand, if you think, well, I can't know what it is, and so it's not worth giving attention to. It can't be given a word, can't be captured by any concept. So I'm not going to bother giving any attention to it. Well, that's just also a trap. It's a trap in the opposite direction. So also be willing to let that go. And just notice that actually the truth is we're here because we perceive that there's a relative lack of whatever it is that we truly desire. And we have an idea of what it is that we truly desire, or we don't have an idea of what it is that we truly desire. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is that actually, when we tell the truth, we desire. And there's a perception, we have a perception that there's a lack of fulfillment of that desire. So we just sense that something's off, something's not quite right, or maybe very not right. Could be anywhere along that spectrum. It could be just a little tiny bit not right, or it could be everything pretty much is wrong, other than the fact that I'm still alive, and then we can even doubt whether that's even a good thing or not. It is a good thing, so I can help maybe to resolve that. It is a good thing that you're still alive, because this is your best bet. It really is. It's your best bet. Wherever you find yourself, whatever is happening presently, this is your best bet. This lifetime, it's no small thing. So we have a desire, whether we have a sense of being able to describe it or identify it is not particularly important. What's mostly important is just that we can recognize I have a desire, and I feel that somehow there's a lack of fulfillment of that essential desire for whatever it is that I'm here for. And then notice that there are different, what we could call states of consciousness, different ways in which we can perceive this situation. So How an individual will perceive depends on many factors. So you could be perceiving it in many different ways. I'll describe some of the ways. One way, which in a sense is the lowest state of consciousness. And that doesn't mean there's not a value judgment there. It doesn't mean that you're bad if you have this lowest state of consciousness. We all do. Everybody has this lowest state of consciousness, probably. If not, then it would be a rare exception. And it's better, I think, to assume that you do have some of this lowest state of consciousness, which is victim consciousness. So this is fundamentally based on a notion that I am separate and I am at the effect of everything that is happening. So I'm this little thing in this great big universe, and woe is me. I can't get a lucky break. Everything is happening to me. Now that's sort of the extreme version of it. Of course, like I say, everybody has some degree of this. It may not be manifest in the fullest form. I mean, the fullest form, we see some people, we know some people, maybe we are that person, who really manifest that at an extreme. None of us are that extreme, but we know of at least people who are that extreme, where just everything is being done to them. They have no sense of agency whatsoever, just complete victimization. They're victims of their past, they're victims of other people, they're victims of circumstances, victims of the government, victims of the culture, victims of society, victims of their parents, victims of their siblings, victims of their friends, victims of their neighbors, victims of their employers, victims of the economy. And just look and see what I'm pointing to, because it's what I'm hoping to establish here is a foundation from which we can all explore efficiently and effectively to get good results. So the promise here, what I'm promising you, is that there is a solution. There really honestly is a solution. There's a solution in which you can discover and actualize and realize the true fulfillment of the true desire that you are here for. And that nothing short of that will obviously will provide the satisfaction that you so long for. So what I'm promising you is that it is in fact really honestly truly possible to discover that fulfillment. However, in order to discover that, we have to be able and willing to persistently, consistently be very truthful, to look and see as best we can the unbiased, impersonal reality. So we're starting just by seeing what are these various states of consciousness so that we can see how we experience them. Now notice that for most of us, so probably for you, we have a value judgment, meaning that we say, well, this guy is saying that victim consciousness is the lowest state of consciousness, and so that's bad. I have a value judgment that it's bad. I don't want what's bad, so I don't want that to apply to me. But we're taking it personally, as if it had something to do with you. It doesn't have anything to do with you. You're just experiencing through the lens of victimization, thereby perceiving yourself in that way. And that is your reality to the degree that you perceive in that way. It's not personal, but you experience it as personal so long as you are ignorant of it. When you see it, then it's no longer, you discover that it's not personal. Now, of course, there'll be some stage in which we do this little dance where we shuffle between attachment to victimization, and a willingness to release and see from a different perspective. And we do that dance for a long time sometimes. So just be aware that that can happen. So it's not all black and white. It's not either you're a victim or not, you're not. We do this dance where we're not quite sure. Should I stay or should I go? You know, am I a victim or am I not a victim? Because understand that we have perceived incorrectly and ignorantly, but nonetheless, we have perceived that it is true that I get some value from perceiving myself as a victim. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So there's nothing, that's why I say it's impersonal. You're not bad. And there's nothing wrong with you just because you perceive through the lens of victimization. Just because that conditioning is there doesn't mean anything bad about you, but it does mean that as long as that you're blind to it, you will continue to perceive that that is true, and thereby that will be your reality. So we want to see that this is so. Just notice how it is that you are perceiving, you perceive yourself as a victim. Now, it may not be in every area of your life. It's unlikely that it would be in every area of your life, because in some areas of your life, some domains, you perceive that you have agency. You can do something. You can choose something, right? You know, to use I have coffee, so I'll be my prop for the day. I want coffee. I feel that I have agency. I barely had agency for coffee today, by the way. It's a long story. I won't get into it, but I was, see, when my sense of agency was thwarted, I felt like this victimization programming was revealed, and then I was looking for who to blame. Mostly it was my wife's fault. I'm certain that it was her fault. No, it wasn't her fault. But, you know, this is, I wanted coffee. There was an obstacle that I was not anticipating. And so I felt like my sense of agency that I normally have, where I feel like I have confidence that if I want coffee, I can have coffee. I'm able to do that. I've taken care of those things. I got the coffee filters, made sure that everything's in order. I can do this. I've got enough time. It's amazing how much organization goes around coffee for me. You know, I schedule time for it because apparently it's a priority. So I want coffee. I have a sense that I have agency. So we all have areas in our lives in which we perceive that we have agency. You know, I can do this thing. Now, of course, that's as evidenced by this example where something can happen and then that sense of agency is thwarted. So I, normally have confidence. I can have coffee if I want, when I want. But then today I show up at my time that I've arranged for myself in order to have enough time to make coffee before this meeting. Lo and behold, there's some obstacle. I don't know how to overcome this obstacle given the parameters. I want coffee in a certain amount of time, but it seems like I don't know how to make this happen today in this amount of time. So now I'm feeling frustrated. Okay. So it's a shifting target because the conditions can change. But in general, we have areas in our lives in which we have a sense, I can do this. I have confidence. I have competence. I have agency. I can do these things. Many things, right? I can speak. We take a lot of these things for granted until they go away, right? Like I can make coffee for granted until something happens. And I say, wait a second, I don't know if I can make coffee. So we have many things that we take for granted and they can seem trivial, but really look and notice how much actually you have a sense of agency of in your life. You have confidence that you can probably pick up things with your hands. You have confidence that maybe you can write with a pen. You have confidence that you can speak. You have confidence that you can do many things, drive a car perhaps, or that you can, send an email, or that you can whistle, or any of the many things that you have a sense of competence, that you can control the functions of many functions of your body. Now, understand this is why when we lose our sense of agency in these things, it can be very distressing, because then we're shifting from having a sense of agency. So this is the second, we'll say, stage of consciousness, the second level of consciousness. It's higher than the sense of victimization. But see, it's fluid. We can go from I have competence, I have agency, to victimization. And it sometimes doesn't take much, because what's revealed in those situations is that there's a fragility. So our sense of agency is highly conditional. Okay. So this exposes the weakness, let's say, of the second stage of consciousness. So first stage of consciousness is victimization. Second stage of consciousness is sense of agency. I can. But the second stage of consciousness can be thwarted because it's fairly fragile. I can, but it's highly conditional. Only if these things are all in order. Only, and if any one of those things is not, those conditions are not met, I'm likely to go right into victimization. But notice that actually, so I'm inviting you to look to your own experience. I want to make that clear. These meetings are an open inquiry. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that in these meetings, what is possible is that you can truly discover what I'm saying is available to you, which is that you can realize that the true fulfillment of my true desire is actually available to me. And I begin to have clarity about exactly how I can successfully allow for that to be manifest. I want to just pause for one moment and briefly make one tangential remark, and then we'll see if I can get back to where I left off. But some people have recently brought up to me, multiple people, so this isn't just some veiled pointing the finger at one person. This has come up from multiple people recently. This observation that they've made, they think that what I've been recently guiding our explorations in these meetings is an exploration of duality versus non-duality. And some people have different ideas about that. So there's a value judgment that non-dual is superior and dual is inferior. And so that's just something to notice, because the comic punchline of this is that actually is not true. That there's this division between dual and non-dual is provisional, meaning we make use of it as a learning aid. We make use of it like we would make use of training wheels on a bicycle or something of that nature, where it offers us something to lean on so that it generally keeps us looking in the right direction. But if we latch on to the teaching aid, then we're making the mistake of looking at the finger rather than the moon that the finger is pointing to use that classic reference of the finger pointing to the moon. So my invitation is that you can just be willing to see the effort that goes into maintaining a position regarding this judgment about dual versus non-dual, and how that actually keeps you somewhat blind to the greater clarity of what you really want, what your true desire is. Because if you're clinging to this or that, what it's revealing fundamentally, and we'll get back to these stages of consciousness and tie it together so you can see how this is related, but it fundamentally belies that we are fearful that life is not safe. I am not safe. I am not okay. There's something wrong with life, something wrong with me. So this, to bring it back to the states of consciousness, we can see how there are areas of our life where we have a sense of agency. I can do this. If I say, can you do basic addition? You'll say, yes, I can do that. You know, what's 4 plus 3? 7. You can do that. But then notice that when something is, when the conditions are not quite right, and then there's doubt cast on whether I can actually do it, because maybe the parameters are expanded, the conditions are shifting a little bit, there's an opening up, there's a loosening of it. So it's like those training wheels are now being removed, or the training wheels are being adjusted so that they're a little bit higher up so we can wobble a little bit more. Now, as I say, when we're in this second stage of consciousness, then we can go one direction or the other. We can go back to victimization, or we can go to the third stage of consciousness. And what's interesting is that the same conditions that can provoke shifting back to victimization are the same exact conditions that can provoke shifting to the third stage of consciousness. So it's not dependent upon the conditions. The conditions are simply the opportunity, the invitation to take a closer look. So when our sense of agency is cast into doubt, when there's more looseness, more wiggle room, more wobbling than we're accustomed to, where we start to call into doubt, I'm not sure I can do this. I thought I could do it, but now I'm not sure. I don't have so much confidence. The invitation here, should we accept it, is we can recognize the temptation to go back into victimization, where we throw up our hands and we say, see, I knew it. I knew it. I knew that life was out to get me. I knew that I couldn't really do it. It was all just a fraud. It was all deception. It was all delusion. I never had any agency. And life really, now what's being revealed is that I was right before. I was absolutely right before. I'm a victim. Well, notice what that experience is like. So we've all had this experience. So I'm inviting you to look and discover what that experience is. So no surprise, I like to view things through a somatic lens. So let's take a look at it through a somatic lens. What does that mean? It means notice how it feels, independent of the thoughts or the labels or the story or anything else. We don't have to get rid of any of that, but just notice directly how this feels. Notice, what is the sense, if you have a sense of agency, that you can do something, notice how that feels. There's, at least relatively, there's a sense of fluidity, competence. You know, there's a sense that it can't be too clunky. The activity, the movement, the flow of action can't be so clunky. It can't be too discontinuous. There has to be a sense of flow and continuity to a certain extent in order for us to have a sense that I can do it. And that's felt. It's felt as like a physical experience, that an embodied experience. I can. It's felt. So then notice if you then something changes and you start to sense, I can't, I don't, I'm, my ability to do it is called into question. And now I start to collapse back into victimization. Notice what that victimization is. Notice how you experience that. What is that? How is that felt? And surely you can see or notice or feel that the victimization is something that it is a state that you do, albeit perhaps unconsciously, but by noticing it right now, you can notice, oh yeah, this state of victimization is one of contraction, protection, isolation. So there's this contracted sense that and that reinforces the sense that I'm not safe. I need to keep protecting myself. I need to be armored because why? Well, it's self-reinforcing. Obviously, it must be that life is not safe and I'm a victim. But see how the story actually flows out of, it's an interpretation of the more primal feeling, which is simply a contraction. Now you'll note, for those who have been participating recently and paying attention, you'll recall that I've pointed out this principle, which is a very, very powerful principle. If you accept it and you start to explore this in your direct experience, you will see that it is true reliably over and over and over and over and over without exception. You can't just take it on faith. You have to accept it not as a truth to be taken on faith, but as a pointer for inquiry. So you start to just trust that at least it's possible that this is so, and then look to see, investigate directly. That feeling and doing are two sides of the same coin. So feeling and doing are two sides of the same coin. What that means is that when I'm feeling, I'm doing. The feeling is not separate from the doing. But when we are perceiving through the lens of victimization, then we are cutting ourselves off, at least in our perception. We're imagining that the doing is over there. I'm not doing it. It's being done to me. I'm merely the recipient. I'm only feeling. Poor me. I wish I didn't have these feelings, but I do have these feelings and they're being done to me. Now notice actually an interesting thing is that we can perceive, just because something that we think is good is happening does not mean that we are experiencing that from a higher state of consciousness. We can experience what we perceive to be good. So good and bad turn out just to be entirely relative to the state of consciousness. They're not absolutes. They don't exist as objective truths. They're entirely determined by the state of consciousness, because we can experience something as good. So let's say I feel like, oh, this person loves me. This person loves me. I'm so grateful for this. What a wonderful thing. I'm so happy. So this is a good thing. They love me. But notice that they love me does not, from the perspective of the victim state of consciousness. And if you've ever experienced this, then you know, so you can look to your actual experience of this. And most of us, I would say, have. It would be rare that somebody has not experienced this. That we confuse that is the fulfillment of our desire, but it's not. We know that actually it's not, because we don't have a sense of agency there. There's actually a sense, and now it's a sense that it's being done to me. Oh, they love me, but when they find out, then they won't. They'll no longer love me. So it's just something that's happening, but it will come and it will go. So I'm, happy today. But tomorrow, when inevitably they won't love me, then it will be, I'll be miserable again. So notice I'm still a victim, no, either way, whether I think it's good or bad. So the state of consciousness is really just about, it's not about whether we like it or not. This is a big mistake. Most of us are navigating our lives based on whether we perceive what's happening as good or bad. But that really actually just keeps us stuck at the level of consciousness where we are, reinforces that. So instead, we can let go. I don't mean get rid of, but I mean just let go. Don't hold so tightly the notion of good and bad and what is actually desirable and undesirable, and start to allow something greater to move, which is this movement of the fulfillment of your true desire. It's the movement of what we could call evolution, or the movement of the expansion of bliss. So we start out, most of us, in many ways, at this level of victimization. We can move to this, shift to this level of agency, but then but it's still dependent on circumstances. Now, when those circumstances are not met, as I've pointed out, we can, and our tendency is that we go back into victimization. How? By shutting down. Oh, see, I was right. I've got to protect myself. I'll just wait it out until those circumstances change, and then maybe it will be safe again. So that's a successful survival strategy. That's why it exists. That's why we don't want to have a value judgment about it. It's not bad. It's just that it may not be the appropriate, most efficient way to perceive in order to have the greater expression of the true fulfillment of your true desire. So we want to be starting to see how, when we perceive, in a sense, broadly through the lens of victimization, so in individual domains, in individual aspects of our lives, individual relationships, individual parts of our lives, we may have more victimization or more of a sense of agency. But in broad strokes, we could say that we're kind of clustered more in one versus the other. And so if broadly we are more viewing through the lens of victimization, then this tendency will be to unconsciously continue to play out this pattern of protecting, waiting until the opportunity to emerge again, but then we're on guard, and then when the conditions are unfavorable, we again withdraw. So this is, you can see why it's a low level of consciousness, because it doesn't allow, it's very stop and go. If you've ever been in stop and go traffic, that's not what you want. Nobody, well, I don't know, maybe somebody. Most people don't like stop and go traffic. But that's how we're living our lives, most of us, particularly if we're in primarily, broadly, camping out in this victim state of consciousness. So the opportunity, and that's largely what we explore in these meetings, is when we move to this sense of agency, and then the conditions change so that they are what we perceive to be adverse, but it's just a perception, just based on the conditioning. We want to notice our tendency to contract back into victimization. And instead, we want to understand that there's an opportunity here, and we could call it a divine opportunity. In this, we can start to cultivate an intelligent way to view this, and start to see that a better way to view this is to see that there is a greater support. See, we have to kind of have this sense, we have to open to this in order to be able to shift into the third state of consciousness. So we have to have a sense that, okay, there is something greater. Something greater. I see that, my way has been keeping me stuck in this pattern. And if I keep relying on my current conditioning to guide me, I'm going to keep doing this. So I have to open to the possibility of something greater. Now, by virtue of the fact that it's beyond my current conditioning, I don't yet have a clear perception of it. But I can look and see, and I'm inviting you to see this is so, that there are many things that exist that we don't know about. So our ignorance of them does not mean that they don't exist. Now, how do you know that's true? Well, you can just see in your own experience that there have been things that you've opened up to, things that you've discovered that prior to that you didn't know anything about. So prior to that, you would have said, no, that doesn't exist. But then you discovered that it does exist. And, this happens. One let's say, pretty much universal example would be, we could say, the sexual maturity of the organism. So prior to the sexual maturity, you could have, there's no way you could understand what the experience of sexual maturity would be. You just couldn't. Does that mean that that doesn't exist? No, of course not. We all know, because we've all made that transition, probably. I don't think there are any children here. So we can understand that this is so, and you can start to see how this is so of everything, that there's just actually transition going on all the time. But when we perceive that we're stuck, why is that? Is it because life is keeping us stuck? Is this stop and go traffic a function of life and we're victims of that? Notice that we often perceive that, but what's being the opportunity that is opening to us right now, should we choose to accept it, is to see that there is something greater beyond what we already know and understand and can conceptualize. And that whatever that is, even though it's unknown to us in one sense, so we can't understand it in the way that we are accustomed to understanding things, but nonetheless, we can acknowledge that it does exist. And how do we know that it exists? Because there's much that's happening that we don't understand. It's clearly happening, and yet we just don't understand it. So what are some examples of that? Well, for example, gravity, the earth, the atmosphere, the sun, light, heat, love, desire, all of these things are happening, and we know that they're happening. You can't really doubt that they're happening. If you want to at least be able to tell the truth about that, these things are happening. But notice that we kind of cordon ourselves off from them, and we trivialize them and dismiss them. But when you just notice that they are, well, then you start to open to something greater. It doesn't have to be some very dramatic experience. So don't go looking for a big dramatic experience. It might be dramatic, but it doesn't have to be. Chances are it won't be. So instead, just notice whatever you can notice when you just open to reality as it is, and see that all along, this has all been taken care of. Right? I mean, all along, it's all been happening. The sun's been shining, and the earth's been here, and gravity's been working, and there's the atmosphere, and even this body is, we're not doing most of it consciously. The one that we think of ourselves as being, this personality, this ego, this story of this person, that one's not doing this body. If so, the body wouldn't be here any longer, because how many heartbeats could you miss? but you would miss so many heartbeats. I mean, we can't seem to keep we've got such ADHD, we can't seem to keep our attention on anything for more than 3 seconds at best. And that's not much of an exaggeration. You just look and see. So what a wonderful thing to discover that actually there is something greater. There is something greater. And it's, despite my misgivings and doubts and fears, the actual reality, which is staring me in the face, is that it's all happening for me. So see what a shift this is. So notice when you have a sense of agency, so just get that sense of agency that you can do something. Don't make it complicated, just a simple sense that keep it really simple. Just have a simple intention that you know that you can execute on. Keep it super simple, like, that I'll use a different prop, a pen, so you have some object nearby that you just have the intention, I want to pick that up, or I want to reach and touch it. Or if there's nothing convenient nearby, I want to touch my nose. Just have that intention, something that you know that you can do, and then do it, touch the nose or reach and pick up the thing. And of course, your mind's going to say, yeah, whatever, who cares? This is stupid. It's too trivial. But let that go for a moment and just see that there's an experience that's felt of competence, of agency. I can do this. Okay. So just feel that sense. Notice how that sense of agency is contrasted with the sense of victimization. So then notice a sense of victimization. So what is something, just think of something in your life that you're frustrated with, where you've been trying and trying and trying, and it doesn't seem to work. You can't seem to figure it out. You can't seem to get it right. It doesn't, the thing, your health thing, or your financial thing, or your relationship thing, whatever that thing is with whoever, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anything, big or small, that you can't seem to get right. And then just notice that feeling. Okay, so what a big difference, right? If you just take the layers of the story and all of the details and distractions away, you can keep it really simple. Just notice the feeling, and notice that feeling is a doing. So it's something that you may not be consciously aware of how you do it, but there's a doing. That doing is something, it's a habitual pattern of behavior. And as I say, you likely don't know consciously how you do it, but you can start to become aware. The entry point is to notice that how it feels, because the feeling is the flip side of the doing. One coin, two sides. So start just noticing the feeling, and then you see how there are so many things that go off, so many associations that distract you, stories about it. Oh, it's always been like this. Oh, it'll always be like this. Oh, poor me. I've tried all these things and none of them worked. Oh, it's so frustrating. Oh, I feel so angry. Oh, I shouldn't feel angry. Oh, I really don't like feeling angry. Oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I've tried everything, but nothing works. Oh, maybe there's that one thing, but that thing's hard, or that thing's expensive. I don't even know how I can do it. Just notice all that stuff goes, and it's just a distraction. So just gently stay with the feeling. And bit by bit, the feeling will reveal itself to you. Now, I'm not saying it will all happen just like that, and that, instantaneously or overnight, you will attain stability in an elevated state of consciousness, and that you'll start to manifest the uh, full expression of that desire in an efficient and happy and fulfilling way. It's a process, but we need to start where we are. So always a good place is to start with the feeling, you notice the feeling, just stay with the feeling. Let everything else come and go. It's fine. It's here. It comes, it goes. There's the conditioning, the thoughts, the memories, everything else that's triggered by it. But just keep gently staying with the feeling. Notice the feeling. Notice bit by bit what you're doing. So the doing will reveal itself. You'll start to see, oh yeah, I'm doing that. I'm tensing there. I'm clenching the jaw. I'm furrowing the brow. I'm tightening the chest. I'm contracting the abdomen. I'm holding the breath. I'm hunching the shoulders. So I'm doing all of these things, or it doesn't have to be exactly those things, but just to give an example, some examples of the kinds of things. And you start to notice, and this starts to reveal, oh yeah, it's a doing. Okay, so now here's the beautiful thing. So now notice you have a sense of agency. So with all of these things that we are, think of something that you're that where you frequently fall back into victim consciousness. But notice that up to a point you have a sense of agency. So I'll give you an example just to make it clear. Okay, so like I often say, one of my biggest challenges is my relationships with my children. And so is it true that across the board, in every respect, everything about my relationship with my children, I perceive that I'm a victim? No, I have a great sense of agency in many respects, but up to a point, up to a point. So it's like anything where we've developed a skill, there's a certain development of that skill, whatever that is. So like we all have developed the skill of communication. That is a skill. It's something that we can continue to evolve and improve. And so we've all developed that skill of communication to a certain level where we have a sense of agency, right? Where we can say, like you probably have confidence that you could go into a restaurant and place an order, at least if it's in your native language. But then, so we know we have a sense of agency there, sense of competence. Okay, so you notice that feeling. But then imagine that well, you don't have to imagine, there is a limit to that. There's a certain point at which that breaks down, and then you lose a sense of agency. So I'm giving the example of my children, my relationship with my children. So it's all very wonderful up to a point. Then there are certain things that happen, and then this sense of agency is called into question. And then so it's like I hit a wall. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do it. So here, I want you to notice this for yourself in your own experience. So I'm inviting you to inquire directly. Look and notice how it is that when you have a sense of agency, but then you all of a sudden hit this wall where your sense of agency is thwarted. The conditions are shift in such a way that you no longer have a sense of competency. And so then here's a very, very important moment. So I want you to slow it down and just notice how you shift. No, it's unconscious until you start to become aware of it. So don't excuse yourself and say, well, I don't know. Yes, of course you don't know, but we're looking so we can discover. So notice how you shift from this state of competency, agency, I can, which has a certain level of fluidity, certain level of, I don't know what other things to attribute to it, but hopefully you get a sense of that. Then certain conditions change, and all of a sudden there's a choice, but we don't recognize it as a choice most of the time, because most of the time it's just happening unconsciously. But I want you to identify this and notice when there's a moment prior to that shutting down into victimization. Has to be, right? We know that state is changing all the time. So prior to the unwanted state, prior to the victimization state, prior to that contracted state, prior to that is this other state. So there's some moment or sequence of moments in which that state of agency, competency, moves into victimization, shuts down, contracts. And it's unconscious until we look and see it. So I want you to see it. Now, at first, you may have some resistance to this because you might say, wait a second, no, it's too hard, or it's too fast, or it might work for other people, but it won't work for me because of these special reasons why I'm particularly broken. I'm particularly in a bad situation. I'm particularly this, that, and the other, whatever. I'm the exception. Don't do that to yourself. Refuse to accept any of those things as truth. Don't go to war with them, but just don't do anything with them. Let them come and go, and just stay with the feeling. Observe the feeling and notice how you are doing it. So I'm perfectly competent. I have agency. I can do this. I feel good. I'm successful. I'm getting the desired outcome, at least well enough. And then something happens. In my case, one of my kids starts behaving defiantly, stops communicating with me in a way that I can understand clearly, starts doing things that I feel unsafe with, like, kids can find ways to push buttons. Anybody can find a way to push buttons. It's not just kids. So now I'm inviting you to notice now, when those circumstances turn in that way, notice how you have a habit of shutting down into victimization, armoring. It's their fault. They're doing it. It's the circumstances. I can never get a lucky break. I can't believe this is happening again. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with life? Why is this happening? I just have to wait it out. How long will it take? I can't breathe. I can't relax. I feel so bad. When will it stop? Okay, these are all hallmarks of victimization. But notice now, because you are becoming aware of the doing, you have a choice. So notice this and begin to open to it and embrace it. This is the shift that you can choose to open to something greater. So you can look and notice that life is happening for me. Despite all of my stupidity, despite all of my everything, all of my unhelpful conditioning, despite all of that, I'm still here. Against all odds, I've survived thus far. Despite all odds, I'm only this shut down instead of war. Despite all odds, this opportunity is presenting itself now. And now here's another thing, is just also to put light a little fire under yourself, to do the right thing, to help yourself. Consider this: you don't know when another opportunity of this nature will happen again. It might be next second. It might be 5 minutes from now. It might be next week. It might not even happen again this lifetime. So take this opportunity. Don't put it off. Don't make excuses. See how many excuses you can make. We all do it, myself included. We make so many excuses. Don't. Just let the excuses come and go, and really just be willing, have the courage, the boldness to see that life is happening for me. I have been breathed. My heart has been beat. My digestion is happening all for me. The sun is shining for me. I'm not shining the sun. The sun is shining for me. All of this is happening for me. So let me open to that something greater that is here working for me and through me. So then start to notice now all of the sense of agency, all the sense of competence that you have in your life, just open to that. Just notice that there are things that you can do. You might tend to trivialize them, but just notice there's an enormous amount that you can do. You can speak, you can eat, you can write, you can do all of these things. So many, 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 many things. And then notice, this is a spectacular truth, that all of these things that you can do, they are done through you by the same greater reality that is shining the sun. They're done through you. Now, how can you know this is true? Well, this is something that you can't take it on faith, like so many other things that I suggest. You can't just take it on faith and this is a new belief. Rather, you have to say, well, that's curious. Rather than just taking that either accepting that or rejecting that, there's another way, which is to start to look and see. So accept that this might be true, and then just start to see in your direct experience the truth of it. Start to see the confirmation of it so that it becomes very real for you. So you start to notice, okay, where did all of this competency come from? Where did my ability to speak come from? Where did my ability to write come from? Where did my ability to do all of these things come from? To put food to my mouth and successfully chew it and swallow it. Where did my ability to do all these things come from? Didn't come from victim consciousness. Didn't come from a contracted individual. Didn't come from there. It emerged from nature. It emerged from this greater reality that is the same reality that's shining the sun. It's the same reality. We can start to discover this directly for ourselves. Now, at first, it's tentative. You're saying, yeah, okay, I can maybe kind of see it, maybe a little bit, but I'm not so sure. Well, fine. That's great. Then just keep it as an open inquiry. Keep looking, keep on looking forever. Why stop? So, but notice what happens is you start to look in this way. What starts to happen is this sense of agency starts to expand as the unnecessary personal attachments are dissolved. So what a relief it's not on me. What a relief. If it's on me, I could screw it up. You look at, look at your own history, and it's a history of screwing it up. Well, that's not bad. That's part of the learning process. See, that's the thing is, but we have to understand it in an impersonal way. So the personal we have to allow that personal thing, that sense of being a person, the ego, we have to allow that to mess it up, preferably in very small ways, all the time. Much better to have tiny little errors all the time so that we're smoothly navigating, smoothly evolving, rather than enormous catastrophic errors infrequently, which is what most of us have made the mistake of. But that comes from becoming entrenched in victimization. So here, the real possibility is that we just open to this, which is the greater life, the greater truth that is already doing it all. It is the guiding force. It is that true desire. It is the true purpose of this life. When I say the true purpose of this life, I mean the true purpose of your life. That you can't look to somebody else. You can't compare. It's apples and oranges. You just can't do it. Instead, because you see what happens when you try to do that, you're trying to live somebody else's purpose. And all of us are doing that to some degree. We're trying to live somebody else's purpose. What we took on all of this programming from mommy and daddy and aunts and uncles and grandparents and teachers and neighbors and friends and spouses and children and everybody else. And we've taken that on as, oh, that's my purpose. I've got to do that. Oh, God, what a burden. Oh, but I have to because that's my purpose. No, let that all of that is the unnecessary inefficiency. And it takes boldness and courage and persistence to let that dissolve. And what emerges is that which is already true. It doesn't need to be created. It's the same essence of that you, it is what you are. It is the essence of who you are. And that is simply emerging. But we have to be conscious participants in that. And then you might say, well, who is it that's the conscious participant? Forget about it. See, this is where people want to get hung up in, oh, that sounds very dualistic. You've got to be a conscious participant. I don't know about that. That sounds very suspicious. I think I'll go back to my Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, and I'm going to, good luck. But if we're going to make that fundamental mistake, then we're just making it hard for ourselves. But instead, be soft, be yielding to that essential reality, which is completely non-dual, but that completely absorbs and embraces everything, including all appearance, and that is has no problem with any of it, and that completely is in alignment with the unique expression of each individual, because that's clearly happening, but it's impersonal. So you can notice that in that there's a feeling. When you start to open to that, notice there's a feeling, and that feeling is a doing. So really you can start to see how we can have, we'll call it meta agency, so that we can start to consciously participate in the expansion of bliss through allowing the evolution of the states of consciousness as a flowering in all areas of life, and leave no stone unturned. Nothing is too trivial. If it bothers you, it's a really good indication that that's worth looking at, and you can look at it in this way. And one more thing, and then I'll wrap up the formal portion, but I just want to be clear that this is not a race. It's not a competition. It's not about comparing to anyone else. That will never, ever, ever satisfy you. It will never satisfy you. So don't try to emulate other people. Don't try to, so by emulate, I mean, that's like you look at basically the manifest expression, and you say, well, they seem to be pretty happy, so I'm going to do what they're doing. Yes, but you're not them, so it won't work for you. What will work for you is to stay with noticing what that truth is, that greater truth, which is already, you can feel it. It feels so good to allow that. It feels so good to know in at least a little bit that I am, I don't have to work so hard to keep myself in line to meet with the external approval. I don't have to do all of these things that I think I have to do, but that I really don't want to do. Having courage to be fully present is what allows for the transformation. And you can't anticipate that in advance, but you can know that despite the fact that it's going to challenge the status quo, is going to challenge your present conditioning, and that you're likely to perceive that as threatening and scary and bad and trigger for you to retract into victim consciousness, that it is the exact perfect opportunity. It is a miraculous opportunity to open to that greater truth that you are, and to allow that to express through the doing, which is the feeling. So you feel that feeling of that opening to the greater reality. And then you notice how there's still conditioning to contract, and you just keep noticing that. You keep noticing, well, yeah, there it is. And when I do that, I reliably feel that way because the doing is the feeling. So I've got a million reasons or more why I shouldn't release into this greater reality, why I shouldn't trust, why I shouldn't remain present, why I should check out and go back into fear and protection and waiting. But I'm awake and intelligent now, and I can see that reliably produces undesirable results. So I refuse. I remain with this emerging blossoming of uh, the essential reality, which is already here, already living this life that I call my life. And I open to that. And I can be a conscious participant in that by noticing the feeling, allowing that feeling to help me to become aware of the doing, and then cease to do what hurts. Imagine that. So we'll leave it at that for now for the formal portion. And for those who are here live, we'll stay on for the Q&A. So let me end this recording.